So this is a 1998 VL 1500 LC. That's what it's called, an LC Suzuki Intruder 1998. It's quite a bubulous affair compared to the old Intruder of old, which was the old VS 1400, which is more of a sleek chopper style thing. Out here filming with the cows, as you can hear in the background. So that's pretty cool. The cows think it's a cool bike. They're giving the approval. Very nice. Well, anyways, took it home for a test drive. I'm just out by the Rocky Mountains here. It's a beautiful, beautiful. Well, I'll get the mountains in here. I know you came for the motorbikes, but you gotta check this out. Look at that. See if I can zoom in. Look at that. Anyways, this little motorcycle, this little big, huge, humongous barge of a motorcycle. What can you say about it? This is still carbureted, but I had to do the carburetors on this thing. It was a little clogged, not clogged, well, a little bit clogged. It was a little bit clogged with rust in the pilot jet. So I sorted that out. There's a pair valve on this. You find out a lot of motorcycles, actually. Yamaha, Suzuki, Honda, Kawasaki. It's basically the breather from the air box, and it goes down into the exhaust, and what it does is it blows fresh air into the exhaust to fool or mislead the exhaust stiffers. They stick up because all these bikes and vehicles, when they come over for import into North America, particularly California, they put a sniffer up the pipe and make sure that it meets the emissions standards of the day, the EPA emission standards, and hence that's what's written on the pipe, EPA emission standards, on the side of your muffler there. It states decibels and this sort of thing. So one of the tricks they do, God bless them, is they put fresh air from the air box and they pipe it through these little pipes into the back of the cylinder up into the exhaust, and it gives the illusion of fresh air, if you can believe it. See, here's the thing with this all this emission stuff via this thing here. It's called what they call a pair valve. I'm not sure if that's correct terminology. This one happens to be vacuum actuated. You can see by the little nipple there. They used to go onto here. I've replaced the line up to the intake pressure manifold sensor. And the lines, what happens is the lines start to rot out. These vacuum lines, you know, these lines in here, these rubber lines, and this fits on just like that, and then there's a chrome cover that goes over top, and as you can see, once you remove it, you can get rid of the whole thing. But on the airbox side, you need to plug that hole in order to ensure that no unfiltered air is going in, and that hole is usually plugged up by this tube here. So anyways, the only thing about removing these is in behind, you can make a plate or buy a plate and block it off, or you can just do what I've done and I put it all back together, but I've JB welded the inside, and then I'm going to silicone and make a little gasket and then put it back together. There's one on the rear cylinder back here, and then one on the front cylinder right there. And those lines, they come off and they go up into this pair valve thing. The problem with all these goofy emission stuff on these early bikes is they're starting to rot. The lines are starting to rot off, and you'll get air leaks like this one had, for example. And I've put replaced these I've replaced the rubber nipples with easy access vacuum lines with screws in it, and that way you can synchronize the carbs easier, because it's hard to get the line on the mercury manometer up to the carburetor. So yeah, what's it like to ride? Nice little bike. I like it. It's a heavy bike. It's very basic and simple, though. You know, there's not a lot of frills on these things. It's a shaft drive, so that's very cool. Maintenance wise, it's got one single disc brake on the front. Yeah, one single disc brake, a single pot caliper, so there's only two seals in the caliper. Same in the back, the single rotor in the back, single caliper. So really simple bike. The only fancy thing about this bike, is the hydraulic clutch on this thing. And that's pretty standard on a lot of bike. Really nothing too exotic there. So reliability wise, they're pretty reliable bikes actually. I just finished this one, put front tire, rear tire on it, brand new Metzler ME88s. It's a bit of a chore. It's a heavy bike. You should use a bench if you can, and if not, at least a lift.
Putting a new rear tire on this thing, it's easier probably if you take the rear fender off. It's just like 4 bolts, and then it just drops down. You rotate it off the rear wheel, and probably easier if you got a bench, and easier if you got a jack underneath, you jack it up. However, you know, it's you can do it on the floor. You can drop it through the trapdoor. I really don't recommend it. This is a heavy wheel, by the way. Expensive tire too. It's 180/70/15. This is a Metzler. Nice tire. Expensive tire though. Metzler Marathon, it's called, ME88. Actually, the ME88 series Metzler, really good tires. Anyways, that's what you do. Hard to get the rear fuel filter off too. Much easier when the fender's off. And then while you're at it, do the differential. Oddly enough, this differential looks suspiciously like something off a GS 1100E model from 1980, 81, 82. I'm willing to bet it probably is. It's got the standard 3-bolt affair. I notice this. They keep sticking these differentials on different models. This is probably the last, I don't know, good bike of the 1990s. Not this particular model, but this era of Japanese motorcycles. They were really putting some love into these things. Like, look at how big that wheel is, and the big thick rotor on this thing, and the big pads it has on here. I mean, this thing is really a substantial motorcycle for sure. Thinking buying one of these, recommend it, but you know, like all cruisers, most cruisers, it is a big, heavy beast of a motorcycle.
And I done the oils and the fluids. The guy had bought this brand new back in the day, back in '98. It's a bit sentimental. My understanding is his father owned it, bought it new. His father passed away, and then he wanted to revive it. So I put some love into it, breathed some life back into this thing, just taking it for a little test drive. They're really nice bikes to ride actually. They had the C90, I think it was called the Volusia as well, C90, C50. And those 50 and 90s stood for cubic inches, so 90s 1500, and the 50 C50 cubic inches is 800 actually. And so later on they became fuel injected, not long after this thing was put out on the market. Standard telescoping front end. It really looks the part. It's got a nice creamy colored paint job, two-tone. Not everyone's cup of tea, you know, the styling's a bit weird, but you know, it does speak to the Harley crowd, I guess. You know, if you're into the cruiser market and this is what you want, then this is actually a good option. I was actually riding a Harley Davidson earlier today, and you know, the difference is quite remarkable between the refinement. Even on a budget bike like this, the Japanese, they're just so refined. The old Harley, it was actually a 2006 XLCH 1200 Sportster I was riding, and it felt like a bit of a farm implement, to be honest, compared to this bike. And even this bike, the cruiser thing, you know, the frame geometry lends itself to a certain type of handling more akin to an ocean barge perhaps, but not bad compared to the Harley. Of course, you know, if you compare this to an ST 1300, well, they're two different. However, the brakes are quite adequate for what it is. It cruises along at about, I don't know, 60 miles an hour, 70, 80 miles an hour, no problem. Cruising down the highway, tombstone windshield, keeps most of the bugs and dirt off you. This is a particularly low mileage example. It only has like 15,000 miles on it. Maybe it only has like 14,000 miles, which is about 20,000 kilometers, 15,000, whatever it equates to. Anyways, really low mileage. And you tend to find these a lot. You know, older guys would have bought them and then kind of squirreled them away in their garage and just, you know, departed from motorcycling, say, for a number of reasons. Health reasons, family reasons, they move, you know, whatever, man. So sometimes you find these, and they're a real gem, to be honest. Value for your money. I really like them. They're good bikes. I don't really like the cruisers thing myself, but you know, if you're going to be in a cruiser, this is not a bad bet for sure. And reliable. Suzuki reliable. You know, it's an old engine. They made it since '85. The old VS 1400cc Intruder, shaft drive, and they also make a smaller 750 and then later 800, and which was called the Boulevard, then the Volusian. Anyways, a couple handy tips. If you know, these things run so much better with 91 or 94 octane in them. If it's a false economy to put low-grade gasoline into these motorcycles. They're not really high compression motors. You know, they're not a Gixxer 750 or a Ducati, obviously, but they thrive so much better on 91 octane. Less pinging, they run cooler, you have more power, and it's a false economy because what happens is when you put that crappier fuel into your engine, it's actually struggling to run, and so your mile per gallon goes down, and you end up paying the same amount, but at the expense of your engine struggling and running hot. Just run good fuel. And plus the lower grade fuels, they tend to be cheaper because the ethanol content is much higher. And so you'll get less mile per gallon with the lower grade, so-called lower grade fuels. Now, with that said, most of the fuels in North America are pretty crappy.
I've taken the charcoal canister off as well. There's a breather right there that used to go to this thing, which used to be mounted right there on the frame, and it's all gone, and then I just leave it open. There's a one-way valve under here. I don't know if you can see it, probably not. It's buried again underneath. Anyways, there's a one-way valve on the fuel tank breather, and it goes and loops back around, so there will be no water ingress. Anyways, all this goofy emission stuff, it just causes nothing but headaches. So something to be aware of on not only this C90, I believe they call it, Intruder, but also many motorcycles of this era.
If you pull into the gas station and there's a fuel truck filling up, by the way, the gas tank, just go to another gas station, because what happens is that fuel delivery truck is pumping new fuel into the old tanks, which are full of water, rust, dirt, and it's churning up all that dirt, and then you pump that dirt into your tank and the rust and whatnot. Now, they do have filters on the pumps, and your bike does have filters, but you can't count on that to filter everything. And what happens is it ends up in your injectors if you have a fuel injected motorcycle, or in this case you end up with a bike that has a lean condition, which is spitting back through the carburetors because the pilots are partially clogged up. Like it would definitely run better with the enricher on, but you know, it's just the pilots are plugged. So anyways, they were plugged with fine rust, and you know this because when you take off the float bowl, there's always a little bit of sediment on the bottom of the float bowl, and so sure sign that these filters filter the lion's share of the garbage out of the fuel, but they certainly don't filter everything. And eventually, that's why eventually you should clean your carburetors anyway. You should set, you know, your float height goes out of whack, and you should set your float height and then clean your carburetors, blow them all out, and the difference it makes is almost miraculous, because what happens is that slowly builds up over time and it diminishes your performance on your motorcycle, and you slowly get used to it. You acclimatize to the degradation of the performance of the engine because it's been slowly building up rust in those pilots and in the emulsion tubes. And so yeah, you should clean your carbs once in a while. You know, get all that crap out of there, put in a new fuel filter, and set the float height. People don't even know what that is anymore. A lot of people, some people do, but most people don't. Set the float height. As you hit bumps, that float is going up and down, and it's actually hitting the tab, the metal tab, and over time it'll bend the metal tab just a little bit, and about 1 millimeter of float height is equivalent of about 5 on the main jet. So it'll run richer, leaner. It depends, you know, which way the tab bends. I've seen it bend both ways, and particularly on old dirt bikes. Hear the coyotes in the background. There's coyotes back here. I'm out in the country. Beautiful. Sun's going down over the Rocky Mountains. And I'm going to wrap it up and head back to town with this old motorcycle. Coyotes generally won't bother you. They have been known to sometimes bother people, but it's really rare. So anyways, not too worried about the coyotes, but it is getting dark. And what I do worry about is wildlife on the highway. So you have to watch for that, especially at dusk. The deer is just wild out here, and it takes out a lot of motorcycles, especially down south of us in Montana. It's a lot of deer down there. So anyways, that's the Suzuki Intruder, the 1998 model. Very nice, lots of chrome accenting, and it really does look the part, and it sounds great too. Here, I'll just turn it on for you. There we go. And it's nice, like it's pretty synchronized, right? It's not too loud, it's got the stock pipes on it, so you can actually talk over top of it. I mean, it is a little loud. It's got a nice sound to it. Anyways, I'll catch you around.